I'm worried about y'all. People online are literally in the comments section saying, I feel like my brain is breaking. I feel like I'm having a mental breakdown. I feel like I'm going to go into psychosis. Hey, guess what? You might be, so why don't you put it down for the night? A glimpse into the worldview of someone like this. And that worldview, quite terrifying. It's creating a giant fracture in the way we view politicians, presidents even. More than one, probably, which is insane. These illusions are breaking, and it is causing a fracture in us too. But it is important for us to bear witness to this. The veil has been lifted on a world that we didn't really know existed. But we're never going to improve our society if we don't get our shit straight. If we sweep darkness under the rug yet again. If we shield ourselves from reality, it protects the abusers, not the victims. Ruminating in the anger, in all of the dark conspiratorial aspects of this. That feeds that particular energy. That only gives that energy more power. You don't have to understand every bad act to understand the overall theme of what was going on here. Knowing exists so that something else can be built, not to get stuck. Your nervous system matters more than the next big update. If you feel like your sense of reality shifted this week, you're not imagining it. There are moments when humanity is forced to look at its shadow, and this is one of them. When the veil lifts, it's not what you see, but how you respond that really matters. While we've been getting a trickle of this fucking guy's documents over the last few months, the most recent drop, and about the last week or so, was a really heavy one. People are really disturbed, disoriented, really angry, and for good reason. If you're just waking up to the reality of what was going on with that guy and his whole group of friends, and you're really upset and you're feeling maybe a little weak or naive, you're not weak or naive. This is just information that does not fit with our reality. It exposes a reality that few eyes have ever really seen before. And most people who you hear talk about it are people you may have considered conspiracy theorists just a short time ago. Frankly, I'm worried about y'all, and that's why I'm making this video. A lot of people in online spaces, people close to me, my clients, really not doing so great digesting this information. The released materials are quite disturbing. Pictures, emails, videos. But the worst part about these releases is that most people know that this is really just scratching the surface. Most of what we've seen so far has been heavily redacted, and the government has acknowledged that they purposely excluded things that depict the worst parts of this. CSAM and SA and doing harm to people. Even with surface level confirmation and not full exposure, the JE files are really throwing people for a loop, and rightfully so. For Americans in particular, the release of these files has been nothing short of enraging. Not just because of the human-based crimes that are happening here, and not just by one person, by a giant web of people, but also financial white-collar crimes, maybe potential price fixing, lottery fixing, a ton of insider trading, very shady international dealings involving trading information for secrets and this and that. The list kind of goes on, and there's millions of files, so people are reading as best they can, but it's still a lot of stuff to go through. And what does it say about us as a society that only 2 people have ever really been formally charged with anything in this? One of them is dead, and the other is trying to get out of prison right now. But they aren't the part of the story that is the most disturbing, I think, for most people. While these 2 people, yes, definitely did so many disturbing things, they were unknowns. They were just rich people to most of us. But when you start finding out that people who you've seen on the news your whole life, people you've seen in movies, maybe some of your favorite music artists, politicians, you name it. All different kinds of people who, are in upper echelons of society, you could say, are very much involved in this. A lot of them. There's no accountability. No one is being investigated. I feel like for American culture, that is quite a shock. By the way, overseas in Britain and in other parts of the world where some of these people's names are coming out in these files, people are resigning, like the government's kind of imploding on itself. It's a whole mess. We're in a tough position over this, Forget all the other government issues we have. We have this problem too, which is it's become abundantly clear to most Americans that there's a totally separate justice system that applies to people who have more money than you. Where, if you jaywalk, you get a ticket. But if you do something horrific and awful to someone and you have some money and you know some people, nothing happens to you. Nothing. And while we all know there's a karmic price for doing harm unto others, while you're watching things happen without consequence in this lifetime, it's really hard to wrap your head around. And people have a right, and they should allow the feeling of rage to flow through them when it comes to this topic. And like I said, this darkness goes far beyond just this one guy and the woman who worked with him and the small group of maybe 10, 12 people around him. No, it was much, much bigger than that. And people you would never expect were very involved with this person. Even after they would have known that he wasn't a very good guy. There are disturbing materials. Just based on emails alone, there are disturbing references to what clearly appears to be something about children, but it's in code language that it's not that hard to figure out, but the fact that it's happening so much, so prevalently throughout years of this guy's email inbox, I think it's really, really making people question their reality. And how could this even be possible? The sheer numbers alone are just shocking. And the number of accusations over the years that never got investigated are shocking. And the fact that you sit there and think about all this stuff and you realize he was only one guy. Like, surely there's other JEs out there in the world doing exactly this stuff, It's really terrifying to think that this was one person, what one person could pull off. Doesn't mean he didn't have help, and it doesn't mean that there weren't other people working together in this too, but, he was the figurehead of putting all the pieces together. And the disturbing revelations weren't just about the crimes committed. There was a glimpse into the worldview of someone like this and the people around him. And that worldview, quite terrifying. For example, there's an email where Epstein is referencing Bill Gates and how he kind of is annoyed with Bill Gates' very Catholic view that humans are equal, basically. That he doesn't view the world that way, that all humans are equal. He's kind of annoyed by it. It's, he puts up with Bill Gates, but he doesn't like this part of his view. And the government doesn't really talk about this because, frankly, it's not their job to know about this stuff. But there is very much a presence of ritualistic type behaviors. And when we talk about some of the picture evidence, the presence of ritualistic spaces and symbolism and artwork, decor, masks matters. It became very clear to anyone who read details of just Jeffrey Epstein's day-to-day life that he was very meticulous about the way everything was done. Everything in his homes, every piece of artwork, every piece of furniture seemed to be a very pointed choice. On his island, a temple with interesting decor and clearly a ritualistic space within there. And then on another part of the island, there's a giant sundial thing with all the different zodiacs, and it seemed like there was a space for someone to be standing on like each of these points, and it's very much set up for a ritualistic type event. And I want to make it clear, this isn't just like everyday astrology. This is something much deeper than that, and in combination with perhaps some other rituals, points to someone's very specific beliefs. Someone who clearly wanted to try to use the secrets of the universe as they saw them to advance their position in life. There's a room on the island with a bunch of masks, and the masks aren't just regular masks. They are masks that are made to look like people. You could look at these masks and almost see like different political figures and different famous people in the identity of these masks. And there's a rich history of traditions that goes back with ritual magic practices and masks just like this. And it's an energetic practice. And whether or not you believe in it, this is what these people believed in. These aren't random aesthetic choices. They reflect someone's worldview. When harm is organized in this way, there's usually some kind of ideology driving it. And this isn't a new concept. Throughout history, concentrated power has always attracted esoteric or occult belief practices and different ones throughout history. Usually people who are getting to a certain echelon of society where money doesn't really matter anymore because they have enough of it, and they want to know what's next. What are the secrets of the universe? What more can I get out of this life? If you're interested in learning more about the history of elites in the United States, especially in Europe and the United States, and the history of how that kind of led to certain things happening in our government and in our society, I highly recommend. Annie Jacobson wrote a great book called Phenomena, and it tends to focus later in the book on our government's remote viewing programs primarily, but it really goes through a deep history of occult practices and societies that were building up in like the early 1900s here in the United States and even before. So this isn't fringe. It is documented across empires and many, many years. Understanding some of these elements may have been at play with whatever activities J.E. and his friends were up to. It doesn't mean you're endorsing conspiracy, but you have to understand how human behavior tends to go when people reach a certain status in society. This just seems to be something about people who are wildly rich. Imagine if you could. I want to be clear. I don't mean like the CSAM and SA and all that. What I mean is, in general, if you had enough money that for the rest of your life you could eat steak, lobster, caviar, you could have whatever you want, whenever you wanted it. Imagine wanting for nothing. Wouldn't you get a little bored? Wouldn't you be in search of the next, maybe not the next high, but the next thing? Wouldn't you be in search of the secrets of the universe or trying to find spiritual connection, even if that spiritual connection is dark AF? Wouldn't you be interested in finding out what more there is to life beyond the ordinary, the everyday? Because you aren't bound by those things anymore. I think that's what draws people into occult practices, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. I feel like people hear occult practices and they think negative things, but what I mean is dabbling into the metaphysical, the magic world, the spiritual world. If you read that book Phenomena, you'll understand that in the early 1900s, people had found this psychedelic mushroom from Mexico, and we're talking about having experiences with God. I mean, all kinds of things that people were in search of during this time and throughout history. People who tend to be in upper echelons of society. I feel like you're always going to be looking for the next thing. And if you're not a person who is a balanced individual, if you have never done any work on yourself really other than, you have a lot of money, if you have deep traumas and unhealed wounds, if you're just never really been a kind person, and you have all that money, and you're in search of the next thing and the next thing and the next thing because you're just trying to feed this bottomless pit, because money, as most people can find out at some point in their life, isn't the fucking thing that does it, okay? Maybe this is the lesson that we need to take away from these files, that money is not the thing that makes people happy. It's always something else. For some people, the lust for more never ends. And I think that if you are that person that has endless resources but has not done much work on themselves and has never really examined what needs to change in me in order to feel good about myself and the world around me, then I think that might be reflective in your behavior. And I think that, unfortunately, those are the types of people he was looking for to carry on whatever operation was happening here. Releasing these files is very important. Coming to grips with all this, though, it's created a profound sense of loss for people. Loss of trust in institutions, especially. Our government has basically prosecuted literally no one, even though the names of the people are right there, redacted. I'm not laughing. It's the sheer audacity that our government has to say there's no one to investigate here, but we can all see that the name of the person that should be investigated is redacted. And, we're being fed lies that it wasn't really illegal to party with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, if you went to a party and saw nothing, then sure. But if you went to a party, you knew what kind of person he was, which after a certain date and time where he had already been arrested, people knew. People knew what was going on with him, and people talked too. And everybody knows that. But if you show up and continue to be a patron of these parties where weird stuff happens, even if you didn't touch anyone or do anything, you're an accessory. Like, that's still a crime. So, yes, there are tons of people to investigate. And it looks like there are tons of leads that were recorded and never followed up on that, based on all the other very true allegations, I would venture to say that most of them are probably the truth. It's creating a giant fracture in the way we view politicians, presidents even. More than one, probably. Which is insane, but that's where we are at. And just public figures, celebrities, people that, we grew up seeing on TV, finding out that either one, they may have been a victim, and Justin Bieber is a person that comes to mind. I think a lot of people, myself included, who, when he was going through his rebellious phase back years ago, I was like, what is this kid's problem, man? Like, how could you have this many resources and just nobody's helping? Now I look back and say, oh my gosh, like, this has been a person who's been crying out for help, but afraid to actually speak out in a way for many years. I think a lot of people are also coming to grips with that, between Epstein and the P. Diddy parties and all that, like, it's so bad, and so many people have been victimized and then slandered, and the tabloids and people believed it, and then you come to find out that, oh my gosh, this person was crying out for help. And realizing that as a society too, realizing that our own pop culture has fostered this environment for these terrible things to be happening to people who don't really ever get the chance to speak out, or they try to speak out and they totally get smeared. It's horrifying. These illusions are breaking, and it is causing a fracture in us too. I think we're waking up to the fact that we were just recently, before all this happened, living in a world where money and fame and power are worshipped rather than acts of service and real human connection. We have put, as a society, the wrong things at the top of the pile of importance. And we aren't to blame that that's what happened with Jeffrey Epstein, but just, I think that this whole release is an example of the end result of focusing on the wrong things as a society, of what makes us great, or what gives us status, or what makes somebody cool or powerful. I think we also lived in a world where, bad things were rare, that only a tiny fraction of people in the world do these sorts of things. And I think we're finding out that it's probably a little more prevalent than we think. And that's really disturbing. We thought that monsters were obvious. It was easy to identify who was a monster. Well, maybe not so much. And I feel like the more we uncover about this, the more onion layers that get peeled back, we're going to realize that monsters look just like us. That we can all become the monster And I believe here in the US, we believed that our systems were working. We believed that the FBI and the DOJ and whoever were investigating this and going to hold someone to account. Well, the more we find out, that nobody even got interviewed or questioned, or, nothing was ever really looked into on so many of these reports and these different cases that have come up related to this. Meanwhile, again, over in Britain and other parts of the world right now, people who were mentioned, people who were emailing this guy saying weird stuff, they're all resigning in shame. They have some honor about them, at least, to do that. There are real questions. There are real consequences. People are getting sued. It's bad for them, as it should be. We're not seeing that here yet. Everybody from different celebrities and different politicians to there's a UCLA professor that I can't even say what he said to JE, but it was very disturbing, and I can't believe that this person still has a job as of the time I'm recording this. It's just it is totally worldview shattering to just realize that we got all the information and zero action, and we've been sitting on this case for over a decade now, like a really long time, and nothing's been done. Really, nothing's been done, and we're being told that nothing's going to be done after this point. Like, this is just give you people the information that you're demanding to see, at least a little bit of it. And what I do know is that this is not going away, and I don't think people are going to be satisfied after reading the 3 million pages that are mostly redacted. They're going to want the rest. Anyways, I digress. But I want you to know that it doesn't mean that the world is only a dark place. If you get lost there, if you get stuck there, you're going to lose the plot in this. And you might just lose yourself. So listen up. Hey there, what's up? My name's Ashley. I'm a life coach, and I help people going through big life changes, burnout, and spiritual awakening find their purpose, find a way to live life that really aligns with their values. I also help people who are neurodiverse, ADHD, and on the spectrum find their purpose, find their flow, and build a life that works with who they are and how they function. This isn't my usual content, really, but it's something that everybody needs to hear. Anyways, if any of those things sound like you, hit like, hit subscribe, and tune in. I'm posting videos every week. It doesn't mean that the world is only dark. It means that we're seeing a complexity that we were shielded from before. And we need the truth. I know it doesn't mean much for me to say that to you today when the truth really, really hurts, and the truth is wildly uncomfortable. But it is important for us to bear witness to this. The veil has been lifted on a world that we didn't really know existed. But we're never going to improve our society if we don't get our shit straight, if we sweep darkness under the rug yet again. If we don't choose to place our focus on the world that we want rather than the world that we're sitting in today, in February of 2026. If we shield ourselves from reality, it protects the abusers, not the victims. And Jeffrey Epstein aside, we're now living in a world where karma is going to come around and smack you in the face way too fast. It's getting faster and faster. The digital age is just taking off on us, and you can't do much these days without somebody finding out about it and telling everybody online what you did. And so if you can't get right with yourself, if you can't work on what is really holding you back and causing you to act out in a way that is less than desirable, doing bad acts in today's day and age is like pissing into the wind. That energy is going to come flying right back at you. So, while it is important for us to bear witness to this, and it's important for you, each individual, to try to digest this and try to be aware of it, it's also important that you don't lose yourself. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people online, like I said, I'm worried about y'all. A lot of people online are literally in the comments section saying, I feel like my brain is breaking. I feel like I'm having a mental breakdown. I feel like I'm going to go into psychosis. And I'm like, hey, guess what? You might be, so why don't you put it down for the night? I've had the displeasure of knowing more or less how bad this was years ago when I kind of started looking into it, but seeing it play out and seeing it actually come out, seeing this day arrive where the people are starting to understand the truth, it doesn't make it hurt any less, and it's certainly not a pleasant or happy I told you so for people who have been, more informed about this over the years than not. It's a sad day for all of us. Like I said, this is just, it does break your brain to think that people could be like this. Good people, everyday people reading about the horrors of people who, are some of the richest people in the world and what they think of the world and of people like them and their kids, yikes. Pretty tough pill to swallow. So please take a breath. It's important to bear witness, but it's also important to know when it's time to take a break. And you don't have to understand every bad act to understand the overall theme of what was going on here. Touch the physical world, be in nature, regulate yourself before you kind of return to looking at this stuff again if you need to. So what do you do with all that anger, the emotions that you're feeling right now? I think it's important that we learn to discern a few things. One, becoming totally desensitized to this. The government is hoping this is what happened, that people become desensitized to it and therefore, just are kind of nonplussed about it. That protects perpetrators because you've overdone it, and hopelessness about the situation keeps people passive. And that doesn't really foster the inspiration or ignite the change that we need to make in our society. But on the other hand, obsession with the darkness and ruminating in the anger, in all of the dark conspiratorial aspects of this, that feeds that particular energy. That only gives that energy more power. So it's important to discern awareness from participation. And I don't mean participation in these evil things, but participation via ruminating and nonstop, just deep diving, rabbit holing on the darker aspects of this. You're going to get stuck and you're going to get lost, and you're going to feed negative energy into your life that does not need to be there, believe me. Knowing exists so that something else can be built, not to get stuck in the knowing and do nothing about it. So don't get stuck in ruminating about this in that way. I certainly don't want this topic to go away. This has to persist until we get the answers that we're looking for, and we get to see some kind of justice. I think certain people may not face justice because of the endless resources problem. But we have to do our best, and we can't get hopeless on it. We have to consciously move forward towards what is ethical, humane, and protective of life. And protective of youth. My God. So don't get lost. We need people like you to bear witness, to digest, to understand the importance of the changes that we need to make in our society, to never let something like this happen again. Remember that your nervous system matters more than the next big update. The question is not whether darkness exists, it's whether we let it define us.